Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the opening session, Tourism for a Brighter Future. And I have to start by saying just how thrilled I am to be on this stage physically today for what is the first major in-person international travel event since the outbreak of this pandemic. And that is in thanks, in no small part, to the UAE's exhaustive efforts in ensuring the safeguarding of public health, which includes, of course, one of the fastest vaccine rollout programs in the world. So I am sure I speak for everyone here in applauding those efforts and those of the organizers who have delivered a really impressive agenda and lineup of industry professionals from around the world in what are these challenging times. And these are challenging times. Should we need reminding, global tourism suffered its worst year on record in 2020, equivalent to a loss of 1 billion arrivals, an estimated loss of $1 trillion in export revenues, and the loss of over 100 million jobs worldwide. Those numbers according to the UNWTO. And the crisis is not over. A surge in new cases and the emergence of new variants has meant that we have seen the reintroduction of stricter travel restrictions. We've seen lockdowns and in some cases the closure of borders again. In many parts of the world, the devastating impact of COVID-19 has carried on into 2021. But while the significant headwinds remain, the forecasts are for a brighter future. How quick that recovery and how resilient it is what my esteemed guests will discuss over the next hour. I'm Becky Anderson, anchor of CNN's primetime news and current affairs show Connect the World, which is broadcast nightly from our programming hub in Abu Dhabi, where I also serve as managing editor. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Halal Saeed Al-Mari, Director General of the Department of Tourism and Commerce Marketing, with overarching responsibility for positioning Dubai as a leading global tourism destination and business hub. His insight into managing the impact of the pandemic in a city that has been mostly open for business throughout, and the role that tourism can play in long-term sustainable economic growth post-pandemic will be invaluable to us today. While many other destinations shut their borders, the Maldives chose to fully reopen to travelers from any country in July 2020. For insight on the benefits and indeed the costs and on building a brighter future, we are joined today by Toyeb Mohammed, Managing Director of the Maldives Marketing and Public Relations Corporation. Talib Rifai needs no introduction. He is currently chairman of the ITIC. His Excellency is the former Secretary General of the UNWTO, and Talib is a man steeped in industry experience through decades of leadership in good times and bad, and we are delighted that Talib Rifai will be joining us today from Amman. And Scott Livermore is Chief Economist at Oxford Economics for the Middle East. And it is to Scott that I turn first to provide us with some regional context, Scott, if you will, ahead of our discussion. Scott.
So as Becky rightly said, the economies of the region and the world got hit very hard last year. But events like this clearly demonstrate we're over the worst, and we're even over the post-COVID bounce back, and we're thinking very much about the post-COVID era. And I think there's reasons to be optimistic, not only for travel and tourism, but for the economies of the region as a whole. And what will drive the recovery are oil prices. This will free up the government to spend and support the economy. Recovery in key sectors. Government policy that's enabling growth over long term. And we've seen some really good policy developments here in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, across the Middle East that will support non-oil GDP growth. And travel and tourism is critical to that. Not only is it important to stimulate the short-term recovery, if you take tourism's contribution both directly and through the activity it supports in the economy. 15% of the economy is supported by travel and tourism. And looking over the longer term growth and diversification plans across the region, travel and tourism is a key pillar of those strategies. As an economist, I try to distill things down into an equation. So here is my equation about the recovery in travel and tourism. So what's going to determine and what's critical for the upswing? Firstly, there's vaccinations. As Becky mentioned, countries in this region, the UAE, Bahrain, are among the leaders in the vaccine rollout. The rest of the world is lagging behind, but the vaccination profile is critical for developing herd immunity. Secondly, new variants. I've heard a phrase that is a race to vaccinate before the virus mutates. And of the new mutations, the UK variant, Brazilian variant, South African, it's the South African one that scientists are most worried about because it proves to be a little bit vaccine resilient. The Indian one is obviously causing a lot of concern, but it's highly contagious, but it remains to be seen about its vaccine resilience. And together, these factors will contribute to the easing of travel restrictions. We expect restrictions to be eased through 2021, first locally and then more further afield. The Asian economies, the COVID-0 countries, are a concern from this perspective, and there's some important markets, Hong Kong, Singapore, China, Australia, for the region. They've been a bit more cautious in rolling out vaccines and therefore may take longer to ease travel restrictions. Then we have market segmentation. And by this I mean whether markets focus on domestic, short-haul or long-haul travel, because that is the chronology of how we expect the recovery to unfold. And that creates potential challenges for some markets within the region, whether it's Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Qatar, who are very dependent on long-haul travel, whereas the likes of Cairo, Oman have much more balanced markets of origins. Then critically, economic growth in the origin markets. And there's good reasons to be optimistic. We expect around the world growth to rebound strongly. And critically, in a number of developed countries, there's excess savings built up during the crisis. And that could lead to a consumer boom, which will also benefit travel and tourism spending. And then finally, innovation. This can be technological innovation to ease returning after COVID. This can be innovation around policy to allow countries to participate in the EU digital certificate, so have travel corridors such as the UAE and Bahrain travel corridor. There's marketing innovation, whether that's social media, other digital media, internet to help recovery, significant events, product diversification, and by this I mean, what do countries have to do to be more attractive to domestic tourists? If the structure of tourism changes to be fewer longer travel, longer vacations, what do destinations have to do to cope with that? So overall, what does that mean for the Middle East as a whole? As I said at the outset, we're optimistic. We expect strong growth and a recovery in travel and tourism and the non-oil economy more generally. First, and the recovery will be led by domestic tourism. Likely by the end of this year, beginning of next, that's returned to pre-crisis levels. And the growth will continue after that as travelers look at low-cost destinations, they look at staying closer to home in this time of uncertainty. And that is also likely to benefit short-haul travel, so travel within regions, which will also benefit from easing of travel restrictions sooner. Where there may be challenges, as I mentioned earlier, is long-haul travel. We don't expect that to recover to pre-crisis levels until the end of 2023 into 2024. And if we break the market down into business versus leisure, the event today shows us that conferences are coming back, big events are returning, but for the foreseeable future, they're likely to be hybrid events. Attendees will be reluctant to travel still while there's restrictions. We can see that this can be done virtually. And similarly, the more face-to-face meetings that were the mainstay of business, Technology has shown that that can be replaced with Zoom and Teams. So business travel will take longer to come back. But we're not so pessimistic as, say, Bill Gates. We think there's some interaction that cannot be replaced by Zoom. Networking, meeting people for the first time. And we do expect business travel to return strongly. And finally, leisure. As we saw at the end of last year in Dubai, when hotel occupancy was above a year earlier levels, when the conditions are right, travellers will return. And we expect a strong return and strong bounce back in leisure travel, especially if you combine that with the positive economics in key origin markets. Hopefully, some of these points we can discuss in more detail during the panel, but with that, I'll hand back to you, Becky.
Scott's laid out a vision then for a strong, fast-paced recovery should the critical factors that he laid out at the beginning of that presentation be carried out. Let's drill down then. Your Excellency, you've got the data and analytics to hand. You can see what is happening here on a day-by-day basis. Firstly, I have to say I'm sure you share my enthusiasm for actually being on this stage, another in-person event in Dubai. It's fantastic to be here. You must be exhausted by the last year. You don't look it. What's the story on the ground? And what are the key takeaways from the past year, if you will?
So a nice, easy question to start. Look, first of all, I want to welcome everyone here. What we would say is that Dubai has definitely shown a great deal of resilience over the last year. The UAE was the first country and Dubai to close completely when COVID first started. From May last year, we opened to domestic tourism, and July we opened to international tourism. I think the key here is, the approach to this. First and foremost, obviously, a great thanks go out to all the frontline workers. Great thanks to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, who has taken, the decisive action and decisions at the right times. We have definitely been very lucky that we were able to, with such a smart city where everything, all the data is available to us, we were able to follow the data carefully. We had no politics or anything else influencing decision making. So we were able to ensure that the safety of everybody was put, at the forefront. Each sector was open, sector by sector, very carefully with the right precautionary measures in place. So I think that shows really a level of consistency that allows everybody to really learn to live through this pandemic. And I think learning how to sort of live with the sort of new COVID normal, being able to ensure that we adopt the right safety standards. I'm very proud to say that, the 200 nationalities living and working here and our tourists, they took the responsibility for living in COVID on their shoulders, and I think that's what distinguishes Dubai. It's that consistency, that support we have that's allowed Dubai to continue to remain open throughout this period.
What's a short-term forecast before we move on?
Look, we've seen improvement month on month. I mean, we are expecting, further easing of restrictions as, things get better. As you mentioned, the vaccine program is going very well here. We've also, have very stringent enforcement of all the precautionary measures. We see, as said by my colleague a little earlier, the actual number of tourists will be based on the number of countries being open. Dubai has a very diversified tourism strategy, which allows us to tap into, the whole world as a market. That has been, very positive for us throughout COVID. However, I think we really need to look to, for us to see true recovery across the world, countries need to start accepting that COVID exists and that they are going to live with it. and putting in precautionary measures in place so that they're able to open up in a more meaningful way.
Okay, we will continue to look as we move through this session about what happens next here, what happens around the world, and how that might help to ensure a brighter future going forward. Toya, before we move on, I just do want to get your perspective. The Maldives economy, heavily reliant on tourism. Before the pandemic, the islands welcomed, some 1.7 million visitors in 2019. Those numbers, of course, plummeted to just over 500,000 in 2020. The nation has been keen to set itself apart as one of the few luxury retreats as the pandemic spread worldwide. You, of course, do now face headwinds, not least because of the new wave of COVID cases in India. So just walk us through your perspective on the past year and your key takeaways.
Thank you, Becky. Do you hear us? Yeah, okay. Actually, when the pandemic struck, it was there was a factor of uncertainty in the world. Nobody knew what would happen there, and the countries were opening up, when they will be opening up. There were researchers, forecasts done, but nobody knew. So from Visit Maldives, our team, we also thought we should target for different strategies. So we did not see the end as well. We didn't see a light. But in March last year, we had to close down our borders for the first time in the history of Maldives. So it was really bad. As you just mentioned, tourism is the key for our economy. But our team, Visit Maldives team, didn't stop marketing. We kept it. Instead, we did what we could do. From day one, we moved to online platforms, and then that was what we could do at that time. That was something we could do. We communicated what was being done in the Maldives, and we went ahead. There was no one who could travel, so we took simple steps we could take. We did not neglect the word we could take. We planned, strategized for immediate strategies as well. And although in the end, we kept in touch with the industry stakeholders and around the world together with the airlines as well. We built our strength. In the process, we enhanced our readiness. As we progressed, we took the next steps. By June, there was a possibility that we could open up the gates. So, in July 15th, the president took a very bold move. I think it was one of the first destinations that was open up at that time. And we were ready with stringent measures, with very, very strict health protocols. And we started it. We didn't stop it from there. It was just one step ahead, one step at a time, without knowing too much where we were heading. So, but certain things we know. These steps, little steps, went us through a lot.
You've announced plans to offer vaccinations to tourists on arrival once all Maldives residents have been received their shots. I think so far around 25% of locals have been fully vaccinated, as I understand it. I think the numbers may be higher than that now. But just this month, you have had to introduce new restrictions. So a sense from you of how long you believe those restrictions will be in place, and whether you are still considering that same initiative, that same vaccine tourism, as it were, because I think our audience will be interested in hearing that.
I think vaccine will be definitely number one thing at the moment. But we were capitalizing on our geography more because of the geographical isolation. We are saying it's one of the safest to be at the moment. So that's one thing. But vaccine, yes, we have started a I'm vaccinated campaign where all the tourism staff will be vaccinated, and 95% of the tourist staff working is already with 2 doses. So hopefully we are leading that way. And as you said, yes, vaccine is really important, although we still don't know what will happen next. Yeah.
Taleb, thank you for joining us. I'm sorry that you're not with us, but it's wonderful to have you remotely today. I was looking at the UNWTO's scenarios going forward. These will not be unfamiliar to you as the former Secretary General. What the UNWTO is looking at is 2 possible scenarios. One, a rebound in July, the second, a potential rebound in December. And these scenarios, of course, depend on a range of factors, not least the ultimate, although not the ultimate panacea, progress with global vaccinations. Your perspective, if you will, on where we are now and your short-term forecast for our audience, if you will.
Thank you so much, Becky. I apologize for not being with you. I should have been on an empty chair there on your stage. I miss you a lot, Becky. I also miss everybody in Dubai. Bilal and Muhammad from Maldives. Thank you so much for having me virtually. I was in Dubai last week. Dubai is doing a great job without doubt. But the key question is how good can each country do on its own? I believe completely that each country on their own, how good they do. The trick is how we work together. It's the nature of travel, connects people and places. 4 years ago, Becky, I was interviewed by a Portuguese newspaper. At the time, there was depression. Trump was elected. They imposed these travel restrictions. Brexit was on the brink, and terrorism was up high. I was asked, what do I see? How do I see tourism at the time? And I said, tourism will be affected negatively in different degrees in different places, but it will come back to normal. We knew it. In less than a year it did. Today I cannot say the same thing. COVID has changed the world. We're at a decisive moment in mankind. We will never go back to the way we were. We will leap forward to a better world. 100% with Scott is optimism. I think the world will be better, but it needs people working together. You cannot, no matter how good, do it on your own. It's not going to work. Unfortunately, Dubai and the Maldives are doing a great job work together. But unless everybody is open to the same procedure and the same restrictions, you cannot have a continent like the EU where one country has a quarantine system, the other country insists on vaccine passport, the third country, the same neighborhood, saying that 72 hours testing and testing, maybe when you enter the country, is enough. I think that won't work. If I were at UNWTO, or now I'd bring the leaders of the world together and tell them, you cannot leave this room until you agree on something. You have to agree on something, no matter what that thing is. You can't just keep doing your own bit alone. It's not going to work. The vaccines also very overrated. It will take the world 5 years for 70% of the population of the world to be vaccinated. 5 years. And no travel is going to start until the whole world is vaccinated. You cannot have Europe vaccinated and Africa not vaccinated. Because it's not a game of those who have it and those who don't. It's a matter of how equal we are. The new world is going to be a much more equitable world, a much more sustainable world, for sure. The multilateral system has failed us completely back. The EU is not working. The UN is not working altogether. We don't hear the voices at all. Each country is doing it on its own, and that's the problem. I thank you very much again, Becky, and I wish I was with you today.
And it's so lovely to have you, albeit remotely. We do wish you were here, and we know we will see you in Dubai very, very soon. It's like a second home. And I'm sure you agree.
I was there last week. Dubai is a wonderful place. It's doing a great job. Thank you, Hilal.
Thank you, Talib. Would you like to pick up on any of Talib's points there? I think it'll be useful for our audience here and for those around the world to just get a sense from you. You said, you hope to open further. You hope to be able to reduce some of the restrictions that still exist here in order for Dubai to feel like it is, fully functioning as far as its hospitality sector is concerned. So let's just drill down. What's the strategy short term at this point? When do you see, 75%, 80%, 90% capacity, for example? What are your hopes at this point? And it might be useful just to talk about some of the recovery initiatives that you've implemented to ensure that we have got to where we are to date, Excellency.
Look, I think touching on a few of the points said by my colleagues, I think it's important we start off by looking, taking a hard look at where we are today, sort of as a global tourism industry. I think you have three types of countries out there. You have countries like us who've decided to remain open with stringent protocols in place. You have countries who have, in the far other extreme, maybe taking an example, Australia or somebody else, who have decided to remain completely closed to everybody. And I think, you could see those strategies may be working out for those countries. You have people in the middle who are neither open nor closed. They're open to some destinations, they're closed to others. It starts to get a little difficult when you're like that, because obviously people travel via many places. So you're not actually closing yourself off. There are many different travel hubs in the world, not only Dubai. Hence, my point of view is that, a lot of this, I would say, it must be for reasons beyond the data regarding the pandemic, because the data of the pandemic is clear to all, and this pandemic is spread across the world. My colleagues also mentioned the vaccination and the speed of vaccination. Also, whether vaccination means people won't get COVID. Will COVID disappear, in 1 year's time? Obviously, I'm not from the medical profession, so I can't comment on that. But many viruses that we've seen don't disappear completely. So again, another reason to advocate developing your sector to sort of operate and live within the COVID. When it comes specifically to Dubai, things are going very well here. We're following the data. Numbers are very stabilized. Again, I'll comment, we have one of the highest vaccination rates in the world. We have, I think, the highest testing rate in the world. And if you're going to test as much as we do, there are positive cases. You also have, we will definitely be opening up the economy further. And you'll see announcements coming regarding that. The reason we're doing that is because the data shows that we can. What we do is we look at how is the data going with the precautionary measures in place. If we find that it's working, we continue to adjust, and if we find that something needs to be tweaked the other way, we can also tweak the other way. What is very important to note, though, is that, as I said earlier, even if Dubai hotels are at 100% and everything, domestic tourism has played a quick role, and I wouldn't quite agree with the numbers I've seen. I could say domestic tourism in 2020 was a record year for the UAE. We had, room nights were almost double previous year. I'm sure everybody who was here saw that. What I can also say is that the world may have changed, but we have seen tourists. The only difference we've seen for tourists is that they are looking for destinations they can rely on that have a consistent message, so they won't go and get stuck. In addition, And again, Dubai there, Emirates Airline, which little people know and talk about, ferried people around from across the world and took them back home, back in March and April last year. So Dubai is definitely open. The second thing is that we've seen is people are looking for a holiday. If we look at search volumes, even from places which are closed, they've gone back up, and in some cases they've surpassed pre-COVID levels. When people visit, they want to stay, they want to stay longer. We've seen that happening here. People come for a week, they end up staying months. So, I do think that human behavior, is similar to what Dr. Talib said. It will go back to what we've seen previously, and we're seeing that today. Tourists here don't come and sit in their hotel room worried to go out. They go, they visit all the tourist destinations, they enjoy everything Dubai has to offer, albeit with precautionary measures in place, and albeit wearing a mask when they're in public, but it works, and it works well.
The SG of the UNWTO, your successor, Talib, has said, and I quote, "Improved coordination between countries and harmonized travel and health protocols are essential to restore confidence in tourism and allow international travel to resume safely." You have spoken to that, Your Excellency, as well. To our esteemed guest from the Maldives, and Scott, to you as well, the role of vaccination passports, just how will they pave the way for recovery? How important is it there is a harmonized effort to ensure that everybody understands and is confident about those passports? And when do we genuinely believe that they will be ready to help get this market going again? I'm not talking about this market here, I'm talking about the market that is the industry sector globally. Scott?
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point there, and so does His Excellency. Vaccine certification is essential for ensuring a rapid recovery in international travel. And it has to be harmonized, because so much about the certification is around confidence, knowledge of what's happening, and consistency. And that relates both to travelers themselves. They need to feel confident that they're going to a destination where they're safe, and infection rates are limited, and harmonized approach will establish that. And then clearly, the governments in origin markets around the world need that confidence, that reassurance, that they're not opening up their borders to a new wave of infections. So it is essential, and it has to be a technological solution. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why you see in Europe a little bit, certainly in the UK, a relatively slow easing of international restrictions, because we don't have the unified technological solution to these COVID certifications. And it's likely, I feel, to take a few months before that happens. But it's very hard to give precision on exactly where we are with the rollout of those important digital solutions.
Taib?
Yeah, I think vaccine passport or the certification is very important, and it will play a definite role in the future. But at the moment, so let's say in Maldives, we wanted to allow them, ease them to enter Maldives if they have 2 doses or 2 administrations, but without a negative PCR test. But again, because of these unprecedented situations, the new variants, as you said, were coming up. Then different countries are easing and going strict on different travel restrictions. Again, we have to change our regulations according to that as well. But of course, we were planning to ease travel restrictions to Maldives as a tourist, free visa, and if they have the 2 doses of vaccine. Yeah, but I still don't know what will happen with the vaccine passport or the certification still in the future.
Your Excellency, Expo is in 4 months, which is fantastic. It is launching still in what could be very trying times. Will travellers or those attending Expo need to be vaccinated? Is there a decision made? I know you sit on the board at this point. And how will Expo provide grist for what is this key pillar here in Dubai?
Look, I think when we look at the Expo, Connecting Minds and Creating the Future, I mean, it couldn't come at a more important time. And I think that's evidenced if you looked at the countries, all the countries that attended a few weeks ago. It was phenomenal to see. I mean, all the countries are genuinely interested and see the urgency of coming back together. And we are in a situation here which is, as mentioned by everybody, it's unprecedented. The Expo, definitely offers an opportune moment for everybody to reflect, and an opportune moment for all the countries to reconnect with the world. We've seen great interest from across the world for Expo. The site is going well. All the countries are doing exceptionally well with the development of their own stands. We are not expecting visitors to the Expo to all be vaccinated. Dubai has not announced that it will only allow in visitors to be vaccinated. Whilst it's great, I think, to ease restrictions, so the vaccine passport or whatever in the short term could be a great tool to ease restrictions. So I think that's extremely positive. The other thing to note is that it's the UAE's Golden Jubilee. So I think the fall here, with the Expo and the Golden Jubilee, is going to be a phenomenal time. We've already seen a great deal of interest from across the world for people to visit, and I think I'm looking forward for Dubai to welcome the world at that time.
Yeah. We've got 4 months, and we know that things change on a week-by-week basis at present. So 4 months is a long time these days, and I know that the UAE is working very hard behind the scenes to alleviate issues of concern, and will continue to do so in the coming weeks and months. Is it clear, when you speak to other countries, what those lingering issues of concern still are? There will be people who live here, who work here, who are surprised, for example, that the UK kept the UAE on its red list. I mean, that must be very difficult when you are working with countries around the world and trying to assess what it is that their sort of dashboard is when it comes to ensuring that people can travel freely. Just walk us through that, if you will. I'm fascinated to hear.
Look, I think we've been living with this now for more than a year, right? So if I rewind back 6 months, 9 months, the conversations were with many countries were as simple as, but guys, if you test this many people, you will find positive cases in society, versus not testing. And so I think the good news is people have moved beyond that now. So it was difficult for us previously to have those conversations and try to convince countries that, look, testing is the right approach. It doesn't matter if you find cases, it means you've got it under control. I think we've got over that corner. We've got over that corner that data is good. Everybody seems to be on the same page now, which I think is very positive, and that shows countries working together. I think from what I understand, most countries we talk to, they feel that once they have their healthcare system, if you like, not under a great deal of stress, they're going to be much more confident to open. Now again, if we take a step back, people have been investing in their healthcare system, they've been strengthening their healthcare system over this time. So it's something that I think is coming. People also seem to have this target of later in the summer. If you talk to many countries, they do have this target of we're going to reach a certain number of vaccinations, we're going to open up and everything else. So it again feels positive. Is there a formula we've been given from various countries to say if you hit these specific numbers? I would say not that I'm aware of. It's not as clear cut as that. And I leave the rest. I don't know if there's politics. I don't know anything else. We read all the things. So I would say that it's something that we're working very hard on. We're working very closely with countries to ensure that the various travel corridors remain open and do open. And that's the way I think it'll continue to go. And there will continue to be challenges. But Dubai is very dynamic. We're always ready to take on these type of challenges and to overcome them. And we have a leadership that gives us the full support, and we'll continue to do so.
Last question to you, and it's one that I also want to get Talib's response on as well. You have overarching responsibility for the role that tourism will play in the sustainable economic growth post-pandemic here. And recently it was announced that the UAE economy, as far as the leadership is concerned, they have plans, the strategic plan is to double the size of the economy by 2031. That's an ambitious target. How, and we already see, clear indications that there are sectors that are being heavily invested in as we see this pivot away, as it were, from the resource-based economy into other areas, including knowledge-based, life sciences, and the like. And tourism will, I'm sure, fundamentally play a key role going forward. What role, Excellency? How do you see the long-term role that tourism plays in that 10-year strategy?
Look, so first of all, when you look at Dubai, obviously, we had the announcement of the 2040 Dubai Master Plan, which looks at how the city is laid out, looks at the 5 different centers, also talks about tourism attractions doubling over that period of time. There is a very firm commitment here to growing tourism. Now, again, if you look at what's happened since the pandemic, starting with business tourism, we had our first. We had our first show last July. We had GITEX, we had Gulf Food. We see the business tourism, the number of conferences, events growing. If you look at some of the numbers and some of the stats, the one I like the best is over 40% of people who visited those previous shows had to quarantine when they went home. So, that's commitment. If you've got to go into quarantine, people definitely see a need to meet face-to-face. People definitely need to see a need to have business meetings. Now, just sticking to the business tourism for a second, Dubai is a hub. It's a global hub. If we rewind back 5-6 years, Dubai was seen as a Middle East regional hub. Today, it's seen as a global hub. We have companies from all over the world covering, a multitude of regions. That hub status also drives business tourism. So we see people coming in from the wider region, the 6 to 8 hour flight path, and much further afield to meet in Dubai, to have their meetings and everything else. And that continued in COVID. I was sitting with a team, a few guys from a company last week who are very big in the blockchain, and they're a decentralized organization, and they chose Dubai to do all of their corporate meetings because it was the place where they could bring 30 to 50 people together each month, which they have to even in a decentralized organization. So we see the world changing in the business side, and we see business travel changing, but Dubai is one of the winners for that. When it comes to leisure travel, as I said earlier, leisure travel, we see, and again, all my colleagues have seen the same. The data shows that there's a lot of pent-up demand. The second we open any border, with any country, we see an influx of people coming here to visit Dubai. People have a confidence in Dubai because of the way the pandemic's been handled, because of the strength of the healthcare system here. because it's a very diversified offering depending on whether it's a family, for example, obviously family tourism plays a key role in our leisure tourism side. They find a whole plethora of options available to them. I'm not going to do a big sort of pitch on what Dubai has to offer because it's a tourism show and everyone can visit our stand. But what I would say is that we really do see the growth continuing, and just as the public markets have very well looked through this pandemic to the other side, the rest of the world does as well. And whether the world learns to live with COVID and then all move in the Dubai direction, or whether the vaccines end up being, we no longer worry about COVID, it's going to come, and Dubai remains ready. And we'll continue to work through our diversified market strategy. We also have many options for longer term, whether it's the remote work visa, which has done extremely well, or some of the other options, you've all heard of.
Very good. Any questions from the audience before we've got about 10 minutes? If you do have questions, please put your hand up because there are some microphones here. We are sticking to protocols, and so that's easy. We won't be passing microphones around. Any questions from anybody at this point? If you've got any, please let me know. How important or how damaging has the latest wave of COVID in India been to the Maldives? So, and I want to talk to you sort of forward-facing here. Let's talk about, where you believe your market goes going forward, not short term, but what is your long-term strategy at this point? How has COVID impacted that decision making?
Every day we wake up with the news of a new variant or something, or what's happening in another source market. Similarly, India was one. It was a very important market for us, next to the Russian-speaking countries. As you said, we had to close down for them late last week. But as you said, it is very, let's see this. In the long term, we will be seeing similar kind of scenarios in different parts of the world. Some parts of the world are now opening up, like UK. But we were waiting for that, but because of our situation in the capital, in Male, we were not in the green list. But we are waiting, and we are hoping with our strict measures now taken for these 2 weeks, will slow down the cases, and we will be in that green zone again for the upcoming let's say in 3 weeks' time. So same thing goes to India. When the situation becomes better in there, we will be starting the flights soon. And of course, it was a very important market because it's very close by as well. It's a weekend destination for some of them. It's like 2 hours, 1 hour. And people now, especially in this pandemic, tend to move for shorter destinations much more because they are more confident. They are more confident to move around and be in the destination where they want to go and feel. And because we have a very good advantage of isolated, smaller, one island, one resorts, they get tested, and some of the resorts don't have to wear the masks while they are having their own private move-arounds. So basically, that's some very big advantage for us. But as you said, in the long term, we will have to see what's happening. Supposing we are hoping Italy will be open within a couple of weeks' time. Hopefully, latest by June. So by the time India closes, another market will be opening up. And when that market is closing, another source market will be opening up. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see. But of course, It's uh, Maldives tourism, but it's very resilient in these things. In the past 3 crises, we fought back very quickly. The Gulf crisis, the September 11th, the tsunami, all these crises, our tourism industry, the stakeholders, the private sector, especially at this time also, they were very, very, very strong in fighting back. I am, and they are constantly keeping in touch in the world of, and we are also communicating what we are, how and what we are doing, the steps being taken. So, yeah.
To all of you, if there's been one sort of overriding sort of sense that we've had through all of this, is that our information needs to be sort of at the tip of our fingers, as it were. The role of technology here, if you're a resident in the UAE, has been quite remarkable. You know, from everything from the apps that we use when we are doing our PCR test, where you can now store your information on vaccines, and beyond. I just wonder, and let me start with you, Talib, how important is the role of technology in ensuring a brighter future? Should everything that we are using, perhaps on a sort of national basis, and we'll take the UAE as a good example of that, should this technology be speaking to each other around the world? I'm talking governments, airports, airlines, for example, hotels, healthcare providers. Should this now be fast-tracked? Should we be better equipped to be able to talk to each other through the technology that we have on our phones, for example, going forward?
Of course, Becky. Technology is one of the most important outcomes of this crisis, plus domestic tourism. But technology in particular has brought us together. Look at us. I'm talking to you from so far away. This would have not been possible or thought of before. Not at all. But I want to say something here about technology, because technology is going to stay with us. Technology is not something that we are just thinking of now. When we created fire as human beings, we created technology. When we created the airlines, we created technology. So it's not just common technology now, but the common technology now is very important. I got my daughter married in Dubai through Zoom. I was sitting in Amman, Jordan, with the father of the groom. She was in Dubai with her bride, and the priest was on the third line. They got married. They have to get used to that. The industry must get used to doing things differently. Now, what I'd like to congratulate Dubai and the Maldives on is they're non-insistent on the vaccine. Testing is much more rational. If you test somebody, you're more sure about it. Vaccine is, again, as I said, is a game of those that have it and those that don't have it. So I am very, very happy that Dubai has opened up a very rational way, a very logical way. You have to test before you go, 72 hours. Then you test at entry. If there is any risk there, then you will be having peace of mind there. That's technology as well. Thank you so much, Becky.
Talib, thank you. We've got a few minutes, so I'm just going to go around the room here, as it were, and just get final thoughts. Scott, you know, your key message, as it were, if we are to see, and one hopes we will, let's close on a really sort of optimistic note, a brighter future, the role that tourism plays in a brighter future. Your key message, your key takeaway from today.
My key takeaway today would be, I think there's lots of reasons to be positive. We have a journey together to bring all the different pieces together. But if you look at what DMOs are doing around the region, how policy is moving globally, and the willingness of travellers, households, leisure traveller and businesses to return to travel, I think they all point to still a bright future for tourism. It will take some time to evolve, and there's likely to be setbacks along the way. But just to sum up, I'm positive about the outlook for travel and tourism in the region. In a similar way, I think that can contribute to a stronger, more general economic outlook.
Toyib.
Yeah, I should re-emphasize that we have to be very confident when opening up the destination. We have to make sure that the regulations are very much in place to protect the visitors. For especially Maldives, we looked after, our government's priority was to look after the entire population first. Second, we wanted to make sure the visitors are looked after very much, and with strict guidelines, they could use what we are popular for, the sun, sand, and sea, and be there smiling in the sunny side of life as well. Just to feel, it's a very difficult time around the world. People were confined to smaller sitting rooms for months. People were feeling bad. But at that time, everybody was dreaming of traveling. Everybody, within their heart, they have a destination to go. And we wanted us to be one of the safest, not the safest. And I think you have to take care of the visitors. That's very key. Make sure they are safe.
Your Excellency, I leave you the last word. Your key message as we close the first session at ATM this year.
Look, I want to take the opportunity to thank the organizers. I think it's great to see, as you said, the first travel show since the start of the pandemic being here in Dubai. Dubai will continue on its current path, will continue to show the consistency to work through this pandemic. And, in the words of my colleagues, work very closely with all the countries across the world to try to manage through this together. And, we're looking forward to a bright future.
When do we stop wearing these here?
That we don't know.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Deb.